Okay, hello and welcome back to Most Wanted Music 2021. JP here, which will introduce you to the next panel talk. The next panel talk is called "The Future of Indie." Will new revenue architecture fix the music industry? We are going to have five professionals that are going to talk to us about new incoming stream for independent artists. And basically, it's going to be about empowering artists and independent players to go for their own strategy and goals rather than following outdated business conventions. So basically, how to create a new fan base with new technology and how to engage with your fan base with new technology. To talk about it, we are going to have in the room David Turner, which is a professional in the music industry with expertise in journalism, research, and business strategy. We are going to have Caroline Wend as a speaker. We are going to have Ronny Krieger, and is a general manager for European Patreon in Berlin, and is a member of VOOT and part of the digitalization and AI committee in the German Cultural Council. Jennifer Masset is going to be part also of the talk as global head of Indies commercial partnership speaker from Spotify. And later on, we will be joined from Mike Darlington. So guys, I give you now the stage. Let's have some inspiration.
Great. I'm gonna say thank you for that introduction. I'm excited to sort of lead this panel today. So the first question that I sort of wanted to kick off this panel with is I kind of wanted to get a sense of folks. What do you think is sort of the current state of indie and sort of the current state for independent creators in terms of sort of being able to monetize and be able to sort of make a living for themselves in the current sort of music industry? And I will sort of let that sort of go up to whoever wants to sort of answer first and kind of go from there.
I would say ladies first.
I'll take it. So yeah, I mean, I've been at Spotify almost 5 years, and it's been an exciting time to see where indies were compared to kind of where they're headed. I think, you know, the labels, the artists, the managers that are finding new opportunities and growing. You know, Spotify's North Star goal, our company mission, is to have 1 million artists live off their art and 1 billion people to enjoy and be inspired by it. And we get closer to that number every day to see how many artists are now actually making a living off their art, and how many great opportunities there are for indie artists to drive their own development, to embrace their careers, and to grow. It's an exciting time, I think.
Yeah, so can you guys hear me? Okay.
Yes.
Yeah, so I can jump in here. I'm Caroline. I'm the co-founder of Mintbase, an NFT platform. Honestly, I'm not that familiar with indie music. I'm familiar with platforms like Spotify and other big players. And I'm just super excited what NFTs can bring to the table to help creators actually monetize their content, because yeah, as we have heard, many players, as we have seen, take the majority of the cut. I actually don't know many artists who can make a living by being just on the traditional platforms like Spotify, unless you have, like, I don't know, 1 or 2 or 3 million listeners a month. So I'm coming from a more technology perspective, and I'm excited to empower creators by selling their NFTs as music.
Yeah, and maybe from my experience, I spent my entire career in the independent industry. It's almost 30 years now. Not that I feel that old, but it is, unfortunately, the reality. And I think there have been a couple of actually quite cool changes. One, for many years, I believe a lot of the technology that was developed and launched was centered around the promise of creating audiences, engaging with audiences, and then monetize elsewhere. And there were very few spots left to monetize elsewhere because everybody was promoting the same idea of building audiences. And I think there has been an awareness even before COVID that actually we need more income streams. We need diverse ways to actually earn a living. And then COVID obviously emphasized that when the predominant income stream for most touring artists or musicians in general was just gone overnight, and people realized how vulnerable their setups have been to depend for the majority on just one income stream, which as a business you would never recommend anyone. And so I'm looking forward to all these new opportunities and possibilities for artists. And I think there is definitely a new awareness in the creative space of people like, hey, we need to diversify. We need to make sure that we have multiple different income streams, and that creates a lot of opportunities.
Yes, and I see, Mike, that you've joined. Could you Mike, could you sort of give a quick introduction of yourself?
Yeah, thank you for bringing me in. Hey everybody, my name is Mike Darlington. I'm the co-founder at Monstercat. We're an indie record label out of Vancouver, Canada, predominantly focusing on the different genres of electronic music. And I guess I'm here today to talk about, how the industry has evolved, new revenue streams, new innovations that are enabling indie artists to make it in the modern landscape.
Great. Okay, so I actually want to pick up a little bit from what Ronny was just saying, and Ryan, you can also sort of continue your thought, and we can then go back or go around the circle. Is you mentioned COVID-19, and the coronavirus has obviously had a huge impact on the music industry over the last 18 months to 2 years, and so I kind of would be sort of interested to sort of get your perspective, and then everyone else's, on sort of what changes you've seen, particularly within your sort of lanes around sort of artists trying to explore new ways of trying to make money, and just sort of overall sort of changes you've seen within the industry, and also within the industry, but also I would also sort of say even within your own businesses, maybe how that sort of changed in terms of like how you guys are sort of operating day to day, or at least within your own roles.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting to speak about that, because just this morning I saw the new CSAC report that was actually quantifying the impact of the loss through 2020 in regards to COVID, and I think it was 1 billion euros. 45 to 55 from like income somehow related to touring and gigs and all of that. And the digital increase, I think, was something like 16% which obviously didn't make up for it. So 1 billion euros less in 2020 is obviously a huge hit. And it's a surprise, to be honest, to see how well or how the industry has actually survived such a massive impact through multiple different ways. And what we've seen in regards to Patreon, for instance, is, we obviously, and these numbers are public, we wrote a blog post about it. In March 2020, we had 50,000 creator signups because people were just overnight not sure how to pay their rent the next months. And, they were so dependent on just basically touring income, and everybody's been used to streaming now, but they didn't really pay a lot of attention to the income situation that much because most money came from touring, and that was how the business was set up. And then they quickly realized, look, streaming is not able alone to pick up the revenue that we're losing from touring income, so what else can we do? And there was a lot of panic, there was a lot of existential threat, but at the same time it also forced people to rethink their activities. And I think a lot of people have actually come up with really, really interesting concepts they wouldn't have otherwise, because they were just so used to be going on tour and, DJs playing every weekend and all of that. So there was no question of the status quo. And we've seen a lot of interesting new concepts and new ways artists try to make money and express themselves creatively, rethink their strategies, rethink their audiences, rethink how they engage with their communities, what are their communities, and all of these thought processes, I think, have led to a lot of change, which I hope is not going to be over when people go back on tour now, but is actually going to be lasting and changing the way our industry works forever.
I'm gonna say great. Well, I'm gonna say everyone else like hop into it, and Ryan, there are a couple of things I definitely want to sort of like follow up on, but I'll give opportunity for everyone else to speak as well. Okay, well, Mike or Jen or Caro, do you want to sort of go back to the question that I previously asked, which was around how have you seen sort of things change since over the last 18 months to 2 years with coronavirus, and sort of seeing how have you sort of seen artists, or sort of even within your own company, sort of change and adjusting over this last couple of years?
Definitely. Can you hear me okay, or I hear that there's some kind of background noise?
There's still
Like,
background
can you?
noise. I can
Okay, like-
hear, but there is still background noise.
Okay, so maybe I just go super quick, if you can understand me okay. So we launched Mintbase in 2018, and then COVID hit recently, and then we had like a lot of people, like a lot of creators from the music space joining our platform, because previously they made a lot of money by going to concerts, by playing gigs, and then obviously they couldn't do that anymore. So with NFTs, they marketed themselves. They went onto Twitter, onto crypto Twitter, also in CryptoVoxes, which is kind of like a virtual world where you can host concerts and music, like live streams. And we have seen like a crazy increase, and we see NFTs selling for amounts that definitely are higher than anything they would have earned on a normal concert, just because their community wanted to support them. And we don't have any middleman when you sell an NFT. You can directly sell from the artist, from the creator to the customer or to the community. And that's the really crazy thing about technology, is that we don't have middlemen. And if you have a strong community as an artist, then you can make money and revenue yourself with this technology. So we've seen a really steady increase.
I mean, we certainly at Spotify noticed, people on your artist profile page, you can link out to events. And to Ronny's point, when the events stopped, people, there was nothing happening, and there was no opportunity for that revenue. And so it was interesting to see people move into the live streaming space, where they were suddenly live streaming events and selling tickets to them. And so we had to kind of pivot our platform and find new partners that could offer ticketing, offer live streams for the artists, and then connect that to Spotify for Artists so that they could not just have it on their artist profile page, but also our email system will email out your fans and followers to let them know you have an upcoming event. And so changing that from a real regional focus of like they're coming to your town to they're coming to the internet, and now anybody in the world could log in and see these live streams. So that was an exciting development, and something that I think, will likely stick around with these live streaming events. It's a great opportunity to meet all of your fans around the world and not have to, be on a plane and be, killing the world with carbon emissions. That you can actually kind of live stream an event, reach fans, in every corner of the world. In between the real live events that, are starting to come back, and the festivals and the other places that, you can be there in person and really reach your fans and be there with them, which is, has been an exciting development. I would say as far as, the streaming world goes, people were listening to a lot more music. Artists were creating more music. We were seeing an influx of, people who maybe had been sitting on an album or, now suddenly they were off work and they were home and they were able to like finish up that album they had been wanting to put out and releasing it. And so we saw, kind of right when COVID started, we saw a lot more releases coming. I would say that that's probably leveled out to more of like a normal level now. But, if your dream was to always put out that album and to finally have some time where you could invest in it, we saw a lot of artists releasing for the first time and also, releasing music that they could now be home to record.
Yeah, and I must say, because obviously there's been a lot of pressure on Spotify and other platforms when people realized, hey, I make such a little living. But I want to say something positive, because Spotify, I think, acted really quickly. And there was also possibilities to link to platforms like Patreon and others. And Spotify quickly reached out to other companies that help creators to monetize money, whether it's crowdfunding, membership, or anything else, and quickly implemented the possibility for artists to link to these other opportunities to make money, because Spotify definitely has a reach and has an audience. And, credit to that, because, it's not normal to link to other platforms where people make more money, but Spotify did it quick, because I think you wanted to genuinely help artists, and I think that was a really positive momentum, and it started
and right at the top of the page, like right on the artist profile, first thing was like, you can give money to this artist who now is stuck at home, and raising millions of dollars that way via great platforms like Patreon. So separate from that, we also paid out $5 billion in royalties to content owners in 2020. So there was that revenue, but then like the real kind of urgent need of like, it's mid-March, my whole tour just got wiped out, my life savings is in my flights, my hotels that I now can't use. Like there was a very urgent need, and a whole team of people across all of Spotify that came together to build that, which was not easy, and hopefully helped.
The kind of the silver lining to all of this, though, is that it made artists have to rethink what they'd been taught for so many years now of what it took to develop as an artist and break as an artist. And I think that that was powerful. It made the artists really go out there and try new things that they might not have put time in. And I think the results showed that there are other models in the industry, that you don't have to tour yourself to death 300 days a year to try to make it. The idea that you look at every single revenue stream, you look at where the money is coming from, you look at how I can better connect to my audience, you look at how I can create a tighter relationship with my audience, how I identify my super fans. I think that became a lot more important during this time frame. So I have a feeling that we're going to come back into the touring world with the newfound energy for artistry, for fan relationship, that I actually think is going to be even more positive than it was prior to COVID. And I could be naive, but I choose to believe that.
Yeah, Mike, I almost have a like a little bit more specific question for you, because I know that Monstercat over the years has been, to me, fairly innovative in trying to work across various platforms and across various companies, and doing a lot of different interesting things. And I was just sort of curious if during the last sort of 18 months, if there were any sort of new opportunities sort of that arose with Monstercat, specifically because of sort of COVID-19, and then folks sort of not going out as much and sort of having more time on platforms like Twitch and or even like an example of Patreon. I'm just curious if there are any like new opportunities that came along with Monstercat that you might want to speak to.
Of course. Well, historically, we started as a digital first record label. It took us, 7 years before we started having a festival presence and a touring presence. So we really came from digital and then went physical. And then we're like, okay, cool, COVID's here. We have endless digital opportunity that we can, start to grow with or continue to grow with. So during that time, we really doubled down on, streaming and radio and how, our music is distributed, how people discover it. We really doubled down on the video game industry, working with great gaming partners to place our content or to do unique partnerships, working with different apps like Calm for meditation music and wellness. And then we really dove headfirst into the non-fungible token space, NFTs, very early on. And again, the silver lining, I would not have really found this industry if it wasn't for the fact that I remember clearly the period of early COVID where I was getting the phone calls from our artists being like, I'm afraid, I'm worried, I don't know what to do. Like, my tour is canceled. As Jen was saying, my money's invested. I'm screwed. And I was sitting there and I was putting together proposal after proposal for my senior leadership. I had a whole Monstercat Academy project that I put together that was supposed to be an educational platform with paid subscription model, sample packs, mix, like all the different things you can think of for that. And we ended up saying this isn't gonna. We weren't happy with the concept. We moved on to the next and the next. Finally, ended up with non-fungible tokens. And like, okay, there could be something here that can create better sustainability for our artists. Better direct relationships to their fans instead of them needing hundreds of thousands of fans to be able to pay their rent. We might be able to do it each of them with 100 or 1,000. And once that kind of like that light bulb switched on, we realized the creator economy. And I think, Patreon especially has been on this game forever. They know the game of your super fans and how to connect with them best. But it took a bit for us to realize how we could offer that at scale to our music roster. And that's actually the project that we're about to launch is hoping to accomplish that.
I think that is definitely, if I may add to that, that's definitely one of the biggest strategic shifts that I've seen a lot of creators go through, like that reflection and like, what am I doing this for? Like, what is my goal, etc. And when the whole digital business started, it was essentially the same kind of idea that majors still live off today. It's like hundreds of thousands of artists trying to be the 10 that really make it. And that's a crazy gamble. And I still remember when I helped set up Beatport, and we reached a time when it was like 1,000 tracks a week, and I was like, oh my god, they're still all hoping to be the Beatport #1 to get the big gigs and all of that. And I was like, what are your chances to be, one of 1,000 to make that #1, etc. And I've seen an endless amount of posts in my social networks from artists who rethought that strategy of like not going for 1 million people on any social media platform or 500,000 or whatever the benchmark is, but to say, look, who really is my most engaged audience? Who really cares about what I do? And let's just focus on them instead of trying to chase the stars and all of that. And I've seen so many heartfelt posts about that change and how it relieved a lot of pressure as well, trying to make it to be that next big thing and feeling comfortable with the niche that you have earned and created over multiple years, and that's healthy and that's good, and I really, really like that, and it's way more sustainable moving forward than trying to go for that. Because I know it's not 1,000 tracks a week anymore. At Spotify, I don't even want to know what the number is, but it's probably multiple times that now, and so the gamble has become even bigger.
What I like about this trend as well is that artists and fans can communicate more with each other. So at least in the NFT space, like many artists advertising themselves on Twitter and actually have real conversations with their fans. And this brings so much more value to the table than just like selling some music like in a really anonymous way, like never really getting a reply from the artist. And this is really a good trend to leverage communication with the fans. And also like this word community also comes from communal. So I observed like many musicians starting in the NFT space, actually buying NFTs from other artists. And it doesn't need to be like an NFT for like $1 million or what we always read in the press, but like support an artist for buying an NFT for like $5 or $3 or something like that. And this is a really nice trend because most communities are built, at least in the NFT space, what I see at the moment, by engaging, by giving something back to the community before you enter the community, and by being like real honest. And I think there is a lot of value, of course, in traditional platforms like Spotify, because of course you do like performance marketing and those ads and everything. But there's also a lot of value in like having this like peer-to-peer marketplace, which an NFT really delivers, without a bank in between, without a platform, which unfortunately does take the majority of the cut. And what really annoys me personally is that it's invisible. Like you don't know how much the platform takes and how much the the music, the different brokers in between take. And at least with an NFT, everything is on chain. You see exactly, okay, this person or this platform takes 2.5%. This broker, music license person gets 10%. And this is transparent and this is nice. And we need to see this more with traditional platforms, because I want to know, as a person, like, having a subscription for 10 euros a month, at least, like, where does the money go to? Like, who takes how much? Because I do believe that the majority does not go to the artist, but more to the technology provider. And there's currently, I don't know like how deep listeners are in the NFT space, but there's a completely different trend giving back to the community. So there are a lot of projects like wearable, super rare like NFT projects that actually give token drops, like retroactive token drops to the community as a reward, so that the people who use the platform actually get something back. So it's not only like the people who are selling the NFTs, but people who are buying the NFTs. And this is a super nice trend. It's all on chain, and this is what will really change the world. Yeah.
Hey, okay. So one thing that I just wanted to sort of add, just for a little bit of context, is that I think for most streaming platforms, I think the breakdown ends up going around like 70-30, or around 70. Like most streaming platforms take around 30%, and 70% goes to rights holders, and then the rights holders end up sort of splitting it amongst themselves based on the various label deals that they have. It gets very, that's the most quick version way of describing it. It's much more complicated than that, but I just wanted to give a little bit of context with that. And then Jen, I actually sort of wanted to kick a question to you. Just I think you've spoken to this a little bit, but I sort of wanted to get a sense more about like what are sort of the different offerings that Spotify has for artists, and what are sort of like things that, and over the last sort of like 18 months, 2 years, that you sort of seen that like maybe you are wanting to more lean into and start wanting to have more on offer.
Right. So we just announced last week that we've done a new integration with Shopify. So people can now, within Spotify for Artists, they can connect to 3 pieces that they want to sell through Shopify. NFTs are one of the things that you can connect to that. But obviously, merch, t-shirts, vinyl, CDs, whatever you want to sell to your fans, you have that connection. So that was really exciting. We finally built that integration. We've always had one with Merch Bar, but now adding Shopify to that was very exciting. We've seen a lot of, when you're building your fan base, I like to think of it as like, adding one fan at a time. You can't like add, these like claims of like, you'll get 10,000 fans overnight. It's like, that just doesn't happen. That's not the way that it works. You may get someone who listens to your track, right? But like to get from the listener to like a fan and then actually like getting them to follow you on Spotify is like a whole kind of process of hearing the music, liking the music, maybe seeing a visual piece of it, seeing it on socials, like seeing it, kind of in your community. But like all of those kind of steps of like listening over and over, listening to 1 song and 2 songs and 3 songs, where that name becomes familiar and you start to actually become a fan of that artist, it's a journey. And the artist needs to like engage in that journey. And whether it be putting up, 3 links to Shopify items, like, that they can sell, or, being able to put in like a live stream where, an email suddenly appears in their inbox that says, this artist that you like, that you've been listening to recently, has a show that you can watch online, or tickets available to a live show, or merch that's available. Those things are all super helpful. We've seen a lot of artists creating their own artist playlists where they can position the music that they've created amongst their community and amongst the music that they would envision their fans to enjoy it with, right? And so that engagement, if you actually have a listener who goes to the artist profile page and they see that there's a show coming up, that there's their artist pick, that there's a playlist that they've created of music that inspires them, and they enjoy those things, they're going to keep coming back to that artist page. They're going to remember that artist's name, and they're on their way to becoming a long-term fan that's going to 20 years from now still be buying tickets, buying NFTs, excited to share these things, and excited to spend more money on where that artist, is going to take them, because it inspires that artist is inspiring them, and that fan is now, more deeply connected to that artist on a long term. So we're thinking a lot about that. How do you kind of get from just one listen all the way through to become someone who clicks that follow button and is going to trigger long-term engagement with this artist, and hopefully long-term revenue as well.
Yeah, that sort of like leads to sort of an interesting thought that sort of just popped into my head was I guess like I'll put this to everyone, but how do you sort of envision artists actually sort of building that community via your platforms or with your companies? Like how does an artist, let's say, yeah, they start a Patreon or maybe they're interested in NFTs, or I guess maybe in Mike's case, I guess it might just be more thinking of like sort of smaller or newer artists that are working with Monstercat. How do they end up actually sort of like starting to build out those fan bases, and how do you think they actually sort of build out their communities via your platform or working with your companies?
I mean, we're a platform, right? So everything that we're building with Spotify for Artists, we're trying to put the tools in their hands so they can use it any way they want. They can redo their bio, they can connect to socials, they can link out to Patreon, they can link out to, NFTs through Shopify. We want them to be able to have a voice and be able to control those communications that they have with their fans. So, for us, we're just a platform where we can host their music, and then beyond the music, they can use it in any way they see fit to tell that story. Canvas is a great example where, you have the now playing screen. It's not just like stagnant art anymore. You can make this 8-second video. The more kind of visual elements, the more emails they get in their inbox that trigger these things. We as a platform want to put the controls in the artist's hands so that they can decide how they engage with their fans and how often, and is it releasing new music that then triggers back catalog listens? What are the ways that that our platform can empower them? Mike, I love some of the things you do with Monstercat too. I don't know if you want to speak to that, but you're really thinking about that as a community, right? And I'm so inspired by some of the things Monstercat's done over the years.
Well, thank you. I really appreciate that. For us, well, it's two-pronged approach. We try to look at Monstercat as like a springboard, as a platform, and creating new micro communities where people can discover the artist naturally, organically, whether that's through social media, whether that's through video gaming, whether that's through now the NFT communities. You create a home where people, naturally go and find their artists. But the reality, though, is that artists need to build their own direct to audience communities now more than ever. And I think it started with even the email marketing, knowing that at least I had an email I could go direct to somebody, and quickly, over the years we've seen the emergence of things like text marketing, where I'm now actually getting your phone number, or Snapchat, where I'm actually snapping you directly. Like these kind of concepts of, you can't do that at scale with 1 million people, but you can probably pull that off with, hundred to 1,000 people. That's important in the early development of an artist's career and really having that direct relationship. So I think the record labels, and this is going to be controversial to say, are not necessary anymore. Like you can build your community and build your audience yourself, but you're only really doing the one side of the puzzle. You're not getting to engage in the ecosystem that allows for that music discovery organically, where people are going to come to you as a platform. But platforms like Shopify and Patreon, they're enabling artists to be able to kind of go direct to their fans and find sustainability in novel ways. And that kind of, if anything, that just keeps the record labels on their toes. It's like, how can we be better? How can we create new opportunities that other people won't be able to create on their own, to justify the cut that we take on the music project? So I don't think there's any companies that are doing exactly what they did 10 years ago and are making it right now. Got to be evolving.
Yeah, and I think that's a really important point, because for years now you keep hearing this claim like you can do it all yourself. And yes, technically speaking, in theory, you could, but should you? No. I mean, even the people that really do care about owning the audience contacts, owning the ownership, and being free to decide what they really want to do, even those people need support. You can't be a good musician or a good creator and innovate yourself and do the best piece of art and then do a comprehensive ecosystem and all the administration and everything that comes with it by yourself. That's impossible. You need to focus, and you need people who support you in ways that so that you can focus on creativity, and whether that's a record label or whether that's your best friend or whatever, but you do need that support system. And I think the smart record labels, the smart distribution companies, the smart management companies today are not doing, as you said, what they did 10 years ago, but they've adapted, and they also understood that the artist now is in a very, very different position. When I started to come into the music industry in the 90s, it was basically always the same kind of concept. You would be signed in a shitty record label deal. You would lose essentially the rights for your first 3 albums until you've become famous enough to then demand the royalties. And that doesn't need to happen anymore. It's like there's young kids out there who put their first record out and immediately know, I want to keep the rights. I want to be in control. And I don't want to go through the phases of like, being in shitty deals for years before I earn that freedom to then be on my own. And that possibility is there, the awareness is there, etc. But I really, really can only highlight that I would not recommend any artist to try and say, I want to be big and successful and do all of the elements, have multiple diverse income streams and do it all by myself. I think you're going to fail if you try. You may be able to do it at the very, very, very beginning, but even then it might be helpful to seek help and just find the right partners. Do it in a way that you work with people that you trust. Do it in a way that suits what you really want to accomplish. But don't be afraid to work with partners just because the world tells you need to do it all by yourself now. I think that's a false promise.
Such a great point. I love that. Like whenever I'm speaking to DIY artists, I'm like, if you don't understand that you are a label and you're wearing 20 hats right now, like you'll never succeed, right? You're wearing all 20 hats. And when you get to the point where your best friend, to your point, or, your whatever, you can take off the hats and give them to professionals or give them to people who can handle your digital marketing or your tour marketing or your tour booking. All of these things are things that really need to be managed, right? And if you don't realize that, you need to find a community of people who are good at these things so you can focus on your art and the other things, the other one of 20 hats that you want to wear and you're good at wearing, and then find other people who are experts. A lot of times that is a label because that is already a team of people who work really well together and are excellent at, all of the different things that you're going to need to be successful. So sometimes it's finding that label that wears all 20 hats for you or 18 of the hats. And sometimes it's finding the individuals and bringing them together as your label or your label service team.
Yeah. So, actually, Ronny, I kind of wanted to go back to something you said. Actually, maybe like more than 20 minutes ago. So sorry for like bringing up an old point at this point. But I heard you mention that at Patreon you saw that there have been sort of like new ways of folks sort of engaging on the platform and sort of seeing creators sort of think through things a little differently than they had before. And I was sort of curious if you could sort of expand upon that of maybe sort of different creator types or different ways of folks using Patreon that you've seen over the last couple of years.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of platforms that have been built in the past have essentially focused on specialized fields. Like, for instance, if I'm an artist and I have been on Spotify, and that may change now, I'm usually there to express my music. But a lot of creative people don't just have an interest in music. They may have multiple interdisciplinary creative fields, and they may have an interest and express themselves in many, many different ways. And they somehow felt pigeonholed by specific platforms to only express that. And what we've seen a lot on Patreon is people that have extremely diverse interests in multiple different fields now being able to combine that all and express that on one platform to their audience. Whether it's, Bet for Lashes doing tarot reading. I didn't know that she was into that. Or people starting master classes. We have a couple of heavy metal guitarists who have huge audiences that want to know what kind of strings do you play, what is your amplifier, which kind of pedals do you use, and whatever else. And so we've seen a lot of artists trying to explore what else they are interested in, new formats, people starting podcasts, people starting to become politically active or being able to express themselves in multiple creative different art forms. And that was definitely something that, again, I think was possible because of the extra time that they had on their hand, the reflection and meditation that probably some of them went through when they were in lockdown. And the other element that I personally find incredibly inspiring about today is in regards to Patreon, the recurring revenue that's very predictable. As I said, I'm in this industry for 30 years, and the last thing that you would associate with music is predictable income, because you always go through these phases of like, I'm playing a tour, I'm getting paid. I have a new record out, I'm getting paid. I occasionally get that sync deal, which I have no influence over. I'm glad it happens, but it always fluctuates a lot. And there's not really a hell lot you can do to rely on a predictable earning. And membership really is incredibly predictable because the churn rate is extremely low. And we have a lot of experience because obviously Patreon is around in membership for 8 years. And it's kind of like your monthly paycheck, and you know what to count on. And that gives a lot of freedom and flexibility and security to artists to be able to focus on what they want to do and not having to do an extra remix because the rent is due next month, or not having to play a gig just because you have to pay your rent or your bills or whatever else it is. And the other element, which I think is really new, everything has always been centered around finished products. If you're a writer, you release your book, and once the book is out, you're starting to monetize. As a musician, same thing, whatever. Membership actually includes, for a large part, the monetization of your creative process. So in theory, as long as the creative process is interesting enough for your community, there may never be a finished product. Or I'm not bound to budget constraints of like, here you have 10K to realize this project. You can essentially take as long as it takes you to finish your documentary or your film or your book or your album or whatever. As long as the journey and the interaction with your community allows for that, you can pivot, you can explore new things, and you can take as long as it takes you. And that possibility to also monetize the creative process if you want to, and not just start with the finished product, is really important. Because when I started, and I don't want to sound that old, but when I started, people would, let's say, spend a year or two in the studio recording a new album, but they also had a year or two to monetize that album, because it was pre-internet. You would tour Germany, and then you would tour France, and then you tour UK, whatever the world. And any time you had new opportunities to sell, then you had a new license of your album to some market, and you had a long period of monetization possibilities. Then when the download world happened, it went down to a couple of weeks. At Beatport, essentially, I think 90% of your sales was in a matter of 2 to 4 weeks. And everything else, unless you had a major hit, was then a big decline. So that window shortened a lot, but the creation process may still have been as long as before. And now I think in the streaming age, that the essential monetization window is even shorter. So now, having the possibility to add a monetization window during the creative process, I think also offers a lot of security and stability to an artist's life.
Yeah. So actually, Caro. I would say, JP, you're back. Are we getting to some questions now?
Well, soon. I'm just here, just like, because there are a couple of questions. One I have myself.
Okay,
so
cool.
like, I'm gonna leave you your time, but
Okay, cool. Then, well, I have a couple more. I had a couple more questions I wanted to throw at people before we get to the rest of them. So
Sure.
Caro, I actually kind of wanted to sort of follow up a little bit on what Ronny was sort of saying about sort of the sort of steady revenue that can sort of be made through Patreon. I also do want to give a quick shout that I do a newsletter, and I used to have it on Patreon. So definitely gotten used to sort of seeing the steady checks coming in every month, and it's pretty nice to know, like, hey, I know I'll be getting a few $100s without it sort of like going from like 100 to 400 or something like that. It's pretty nice to sort of see that. So definitely I've seen that firsthand. But Caro, what I was sort of curious about was in the NFT space is that, like, we often sort of see headlines around sort of big number sales and stuff like that. But do you have sort of more insight into things that may not be sort of the like, hey, people should like sold this thing for millions of dollars, that are more like, hey, here's artists who are able to sort of start seeing, what Ronny was sort of getting at, which is more steady income and more sort of like month to month sort of payments that are not quite as sort of like high, have such high sort of velocity, or not velocity, but high sort of I don't know, there's sort of like a high sort of high range of payments and stuff like that.
Yeah, definitely. So first of all, yes, of course, smaller artists are really not that much in the media when it comes to NFT sales. But also there are several communities that help smaller artists to develop and sell their NFTs. So there's NXM on Twitter, you can look them up. There's DAO Records, they're really like pushing smaller artists in the space. So it is true that as a smaller artist, you do need to build your community alone. So you don't have a label behind you, you don't have performance marketing. So everything is just up to you, up to the artist. So in terms of like having a steady income stream that is predictable, no, that is definitely not given when you enter the NFT space. What is really fascinating about like selling NFTs is that, for example, on Mintbase, the token standard we use is the NEP 171, the NEAR blockchain. It's basically like ERC 721 on Ethereum. But what we have here is a token, NFT, that can be sold as a song. And every time it is resold and resold and resold and resold, the original creator, the artist, gets the royalty. So always with every resale. So wherever the token is resold on Mintbase or on any other NFT platform on the NEAR blockchain. So this is kind of can be seen as a steady income stream, but it's not that sales are predictable. It's really up to the artist. But there are several programs where artists can find support. For example, NEAR has a guild program specifically for musicians where you can do smaller bounties and earn money through that. I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, no, that definitely was sort of like hitting my question there. And I see we have about 5 minutes left. So are we right now ready to head to Q&A, JP?
Yeah, even though I think, thank you for the word, David, that Caro just answered, because we had one question for her from Kristen Niemak that was asking to what extent NFTs are a viable method of income for smaller artists. Most of the news with them seems to revolve around already successful artists. So.
Yeah, I mean, it's really up to every artist themselves. Like, there's no established platform that drives marketing for the artist. It's really completely new technology. It's so early. Like, I think as an artist, you don't have anything to lose. I think everyone should play around with any NFT platform. Maybe on Ethereum, it might be a bit too expensive because it's really expensive to create NFTs. But on other chains, like, just try it out. There's nothing you can lose if you don't put a lot of money in it. For example, on the NEAR chain or on Mintbase, it's like less than a cent to create one NFT. And just playing around with the technology, learning about what it really does and how transparent it is. And you can see like every transaction, like if it's sold for a set price or in an auction, like everything is on chain. And this is a fascinating thing and a completely different paradigm. We are not relying on labels or on platforms, but you have to rely on yourself as an artist. It's very difficult to get into the space. My recommendation would be for new people who are joining the space, go on Twitter, follow all the big NFT platforms like Mintbase, OpenSea, SuperRare, and follow music-specific NFT groups. So, and just like get yourself out there and establish your Twitter profile and join different Discord groups. And yeah, there's nothing else you can do, but there's no guarantee that you will sell. Even it's really so new that we cannot do anything about it.
Okay, great. And somebody is asking another thing. Any advice on how to start building that first audience when you're still wearing those 20 hats beyond just getting your friends and family to listen, buy, subscribe? I think this question is directed to the Spotify person.
How to find fans to listen to your music? I mean,
No,
I think
how to create your first fan base. Because at the beginning, when I put a record out, I call up my family, buy the record, watch the video. And this is what we do also with our friends. But this is
Yeah.
like not a real fan base. It's like, oh, there is a way to build a fan base when you're wearing all of these 20 hats you were talking about before.
Totally. I mean, I think, initially when you're making, your music, you put it, you upload it via a distributor or a label or whoever, and it goes up to Spotify, right? As soon as it's uploaded, you log into Spotify for Artists and you can do a whole playlist pitching process to be able to get it into our algorithmic playlists and in front of over 100 editors globally that we have, looking at those pitches every week. From that, you're going to get placed into release radar for people who like the genre, the instruments, the mood, whatever, kind of descriptives you've put into that playlist pitch, and you're going to end up in some listeners' release radar, right? Based upon those listens and the listener engagement, we're going to surface it to more people, right? The more people like your music, the more they save it, they're going to listen to a song, be like, wow, I really like this song, right? And then they're going to go to your artist profile page. On your artist profile page, from day one, you need to be sure that you have a bio, you have links to your socials, you have photos, you have a story there that helps explain who you are as an artist to begin that journey, to begin telling your story. So it could be that artist playlist that positions you within the community that you were inspired by, that made you decide to start making music in the first place, right? It could be on socials where you're driving listener engagement, where you're kind of tying back to that community. So I think you can tell a great social story, and then your bio.
And what about Patreon? If I may just put this in and slide Patreon in. How could Patreon help me build my first fan base?
Yeah, I have two parts of that answer. First, Patreon at this point is not a discovery platform. It hasn't been built for that. It was essentially built as a platform that helps you have a paywall, that helps you communicate with your audiences, but not to build an audience. As Jack announced in one of his recent announcements, is we are building out features to help you build audiences, because we have more than 8 million active patron support creators on the platform now. So many of them have an interest in multi-patronage. So we're going to find innovative ways to help you build an audience. But at the same time, I think there was an important earlier point. Building a fan base is one by one by one, and it starts with one. And it's also very, very different and unique for every individual artist. It depends what genre you do. Are you a live musician or not? If you are a live band or a live musician, there's nothing more powerful than experiencing you live. That is just such an incredible moment. And I think many of us have probably been in these shoes, going to a concert or being at a festival, whatever, listening to music incredibly loud, or even in a record store with headphones, like blasting, taking the record home and being like a little disappointed when you listen to it in your home environment, because live was just such an overwhelming experience. So it really, there is no formula of this is how you build your audience.
Well, I think that one of the formula that we always hear, but it is always true, is work hard. Work hard, never stop, and never let anybody get you down.
Yeah, and find the community that is somehow related to what you do, and then go from there, I guess.
Yeah, I want to say thank you. I want to say thank you so much for everyone joining us today. And JP, you can take us out because I see we're running over time.
Yes, thank you, everybody. It was really lovely to talk, and we know where to find you. We're gonna have all of your contact in our pages, and see you soon.
Thank you.
Bye, everybody.